Hi, Isnan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to make you a host. Can you assign me as the presenter?
Okay, sure. Uh,
Oh, no, I think I still can.
Yeah, you're already a presenter.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. It's 5 now, so maybe let us just start with the fireside chat. Yeah. Before we start, Isnan, can you make sure that it's being recorded?
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yes.
hello and welcome to the AISC Network Fireside Chat. So basically, I'm Yong Wei. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the participants of this event. Basically, I'll be moderating the session. And this event is actually happened because of the support from the Royal Academy of Engineering UK under the Frontiers Champion Award. In today's session, we are going to discuss how cities can develop solutions using open data and open source platform. So before I introduce the panelists, just a few housekeeping items. Basically, this session will be recorded and it will be available in YouTube channel in a week's time. Yeah, and a lot of attendees will ask this whether they will get certificates or not. Yes, we will provide e-certificate to you after the session. Okay, and during the session, if you have any question to the panelists, basically we encourage you to use either the Q&A box to chat with the panelists. Okay, it's available at the bottom right. Or you can also raise your hand to signal that you want to ask questions, and we will allow you to unmute and ask questions directly to the panelists. At the end of the session, we hope you will share your feedback through the survey form that will be posted as well. Yeah. So without further delay, I'll just introduce our panelists. We have Tania Suarez joining us from Spain. Yeah, Tania is actually a founder of IoT Tribe, an equity-free tech ecosystem builder that brings startups and corporations together to do business with hubs in London, Singapore, and Madrid. She also runs BlueSpecs, a digital transformation agency that works with companies and public sector organizations on tech adoption, from skills to ecosystem building, and helping them understand and manage data value chain. The agency has set and run the IoT Next Club, which is free to join, and work with over 1,900 researchers from across Europe on go-to-market strategies for their technology. She's a member of the European Innovation Council, WEF European Digital Leader, and evaluator for the Canadian Supercluster Initiatives, and a member of Tech London Advocates and Tech Spain Advocates. Finally, Tania is on the board of the Alliance of Internet of Things Innovation, an industry body set up to promote IoT adoption in Europe, where she collaborates with amazing companies of all sizes and sectors. We also have Ben Hor Pinto joining us from Philippines. He works at the intersection of the geospatial data development and openness field. As a result, he has grown accustomed to wearing a variety of hats. He currently serves as the CTO and head of strategies for smart cities, and has his own consultancy, BNHR, where he helps people create beneficial and sustainable solutions to spatial and data problems using open technologies. He believes with a passion in the virtue of freedom, fairness, and openness, especially when applied in the field of data, governance, and tech. He advocates and uses free and open source software primarily, and has not used a Windows or Mac OS for almost a decade. Last but not least, we have Ali, who is joining us from Amazon Web Services. He is a specialist solution architect for IoT at AWS. With over 12 years of experience in IoT and smart cities, Ali brings his technical expertise to enable and help customers to accelerate their IoT implementation. Ali also holds an executive MBA from EdHack Business School, giving him the ability to zoom out and help customers at a strategic level. Yeah. So let's start to talk about the topic for today. Basically, cities are increasingly getting access to all kinds of data. In the past, these data are stacked in silos, as a lot of us know. But in recent years, cities are making some of the data open. So my first question is to Tanya. Based on your experience, can local government agencies actually benefit from open data?
Well, first of all, Yung-Wei, thank you so much for the invitation to be with you all today. It's a real pleasure. And thank you for giving such a thorough introduction on my background. I think that's going to really help with some of the questions and understanding the context for some of the answers I'm going to give you. So the short answer is yes, of course. I mean, data is absolutely everywhere. It's being collected directly by cities through a multitude of different sources, whether devices, but also through forms. Most cities have a lot of information that's personal information on their citizens. And I think that we're living in a unique point in time now, because we have the capability of aggregating all those different sources and really deriving value from that. I have prepared a short presentation. Perhaps maybe I can share that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll pass the role to sharing.
Brilliant, thank you. And please excuse me, everyone. I really do hope this is not death by PowerPoint, but I just wanted to perhaps illustrate some of the points that I'm making, and hopefully also set the scene for some of the conversations that we're going to be having in this fireside chat. So I think my main thesis is that you can use open data, and that can be the source, the secret source of technologies that we use to solve essentially problems that we've been suffering from over years, decades, as citizens and as policymakers. At IoT Tribe, our main objective is to create technology ecosystems. And we do that by bringing together the startups, the technology providers that have got these amazing new technologies, and companies, but also, of course, public sector agencies that can ultimately derive benefit from these new technologies. We have a number of different programs that are really relevant and have shown us firsthand all the talent and the technology that can solve these real societal problems. I'm just going to single out two of those programs. Our Space Tech program, which is in collaboration with the European Union and with the European Space Agency, is actually about getting space data and applying that or aggregating it with other sources of data to solve some of those problems that we're experiencing, not just in cities, but in communities the world over. The second one that I'd like to single out is Connected Places, which is, as the name might suggest, a program that is about finding the technologies that connect people, places, and enable the people and the places and to really find ways in which we can decarbonize the economy and to counteract, I suppose, the effects of climate change. We've got global alumni. All our programs are open and we're equity free, as Yung-Wei mentioned. But let me come now to some of the central tenets, I think, that will form the basis on which our future open data initiatives can be built and can continue to add value to our lives and to our businesses. There is an International Open Data Charter, and it establishes 6 key tenets. Data should be open by default. It has to be timely and comprehensive, accessible and usable, comparable and interoperable, absolutely key point. And essentially, it can be used for improved governance and citizen engagement on the one hand, but also for inclusive development and for innovation. And I think this really sums up, Yung Wei, you know, when you're asking me, can cities benefit from the use of open data? I think these key tenets are absolutely demonstrating or suggesting that that is the case. Some of the benefits, just in as you can see here, are about improving efficiency of public services, the quality, developing new ways in which cities can meet the needs of citizens and businesses, and increasingly, of course, cities need to also address the challenges around climate change. There is a renewed, I think, effort and interest in making sure that this is not just something that is black on white, a paper that is signed by policymakers, but is really something that can guide the purchase and the procurement of new technologies and can be used to change behaviours, I suppose, across, again, citizens and the way that we live and work and enjoy our cities and our communities. So a few things here on realising those benefits. Clearly, cities need to understand what they want to achieve. Do they need to buy in technology, or can they build something themselves? Do they need to build something themselves? Generally, the answer is not. You know, there will be somebody who can build something better for you. And I think here you need to consider new solution providers because they are agile. There is a much narrower gap between the sales teams and delivery partners, and generally they really do have a long-term interest in helping achieve objectives. The other aspect, of course, is that you need to really understand what the costs are. They are financial, but of course also in the use of energy. As you collect data and you analyze that data, it normally needs to be stored somewhere, and that actually requires a lot of computing power. And the third element here is looking at vendor locking. And my final recommendation here for realizing benefits is pilot to prove. So I just want to really briefly go in through, it's essentially a case study. One of our companies, Urban Tide, they're currently on our Connected Places Accelerator. We have an event on the 3rd of June. You're all very much invited, and they're going to be telling us a little bit more about their technology there. But essentially, Urban Tide have a really interesting platform that essentially deconflicts and provides an environment in which data can be used in a frictionless manner, but also it can be the source of AI and other solutions that can continue to feed into the process and ensure that the services learn as they are developed and implemented. Just to give you some examples of the things that they've done, they've worked with Cycling Scotland, and actually the result of implementing Urban Move in that was a 200% increase in the investment required in or implemented in the road network, making sure that the cycling lanes were where they needed to be. It's typically something that is a headache for urban planners, trying to predict exactly what the routes are that cyclists are going to use, pedestrians, but also cars and public transport. So this is one example. Another example of something they've done is for Transport for London. They facilitated a whole platform there with APIs, and that generated over £100 million for Transport for London in terms of saving times. And as you can see, 42% of Londoners use one of the applications developed. Finally, I think, and I'd like to pass on to my colleagues now, because I'm sure they're going to be, I know for a fact they're going to be sharing some really interesting data and insights with you. I'd like to invite you all to this Connected Places Tech Games, because I think that there you're going to be able to see also some of the new and exciting technologies and how they're being adopted, on the one hand by the public sector and local authorities across the UK, but secondly, we're also going to be taking a look at the investment perspective. So how have investors and VCs change their investment thesis to look at our climate change needs and decarbonisation needs. So I'll leave it there. Thank you. I've managed to unmute myself, sorry, to mute myself in that. And thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's a great thing that you mentioned about investment, because the majority of smart cities project would like to achieve sustainability and control the economic growth. But most of the local governments or government agencies would like to avoid the loss of already invested resources. Yeah, especially in the global south. So in reality, this can turn out to be very utopian. Ben, I have a question based on your experience. How can cities achieve transformation with minimum effort but great impact by adopting this open data and also open source framework?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for that question, Yongwei, and also thank you so much for inviting me to join you guys here. I don't have a presentation prepared, but I do want to speak freely and share with you guys our experiences at Smart City and my own personal experiences about how we can achieve digital transformation using openness and using data. So a brief reintroduction of myself. My name is Ben Hur. I'm from the Philippines. I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer of Smart City. Smart City is a tech nonprofit. We're working on the smart cities field, probably the first of its kind. What differentiates us from other outfits in this field is that our focus isn't really about tech. It's more on putting openness and citizens and people at the heart of the smart city development. Something that we like to say in smart city is that we make smart cities open and we open smart cities. So aside from that, another thing that I think you should know about me to give proper context to my experiences is that I'm currently also the data training lead for the Open Knowledge Foundation. So Open Knowledge is a global nonprofit organization working towards a fair, a free, and open future. So to do that, we teach people, civil society organizations, journalists, newsrooms, ordinary citizens, how they can work with data, how they can build their data literacy. We also help people build and create tools that will leverage open data as well as the data literacy skills that they have. For example, SICAN, if you are familiar with it, it's the open source open data platform. It's currently supported and held in trust by Open Knowledge. Another one is the Open Definition, which you can find at opendefinition.org. It sets out the principles that define what openness means in relation to content and in relation to data. It is also a product of the Open Knowledge Foundation, and it basically says or defines openness as meaning that anyone can freely use, access, modify, and share it for any purpose. That is very important because that is what I mean by open when I use the word. In relation to the question about how cities can achieve digital transformation with minimum effort but great impact, I just have a few things that I want to share. The first one is that your journey towards digital transformation should be supported by two things, really. First one is open data or openness in general. And the second one is a data literate citizenry. As you may notice, that's also the same things that we advocate for in smart cities. Open data is important because it provides us with the raw materials needed to create solutions, find bottlenecks, do analysis, communicate with each other, and become more inclusive as well as innovate. If we don't have open, reliable data sets, we might as well be planning with our eyes and ears closed, right? If we don't know what's happening, because data is evidence, then we might as well be just put on blindfolds and earmuffs while doing our planning. If data or open data is the raw materials, then your data literate citizens are your creators. They're your artisans. they're your innovators. By having people know how to work with data and appreciate the value of data, it becomes easier for us to also work with them. We know how difficult it is to engage citizens, especially when we start talking about numbers and things like that. But it's that much easier to communicate, with each other and understand each other if we have, a common language, if we're talking the same language. And in this case, if we're all talking about, data, then it's that much easier for us to arrive at solutions. These people, these data literate citizenry, can build solutions for you. They can also look at your problems from a different perspective and point of view, but they can also be your harshest critics, right? But the beauty of it is criticism from a data literate citizenry will not be baseless. People will use the data to criticize what you're doing, but at the end of the day, you need that. You need to listen to what the people want. You need to listen to what the people need. And the beauty of use having open data with this data literate citizenry is that these criticisms and suggestions will usually be constructive. And you can always test it, hypothesize with it, and confirm it by actually looking at the data. Second thing, cities, communities don't need to break the bank, or spend an enormous amount of money just to perform the digital transformation or even do the open data project. We don't need to start with a high-tech application. We don't need to start immediately with IoT, AI, machine learning. We don't even need to start with a data portal. We can start small, we can start simple. That's one of the things that we're trying to do in Smart City. We're focusing on communities, municipalities that don't have big budgets, and we're helping them transition, become more digital, transform from the way that they do their day-to-day their day-to-day functions. Uh, for example, when it comes to opening data, we can just release the data first under an open license, and then we can build on that. One thing that I would like to introduce to people would probably be the 5-star open data approach that you can find online. It was proposed by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and it provides a very good framework to assess where we are in our open data journey and what are the next steps that we need to do in order to improve or scale up. So I'll just briefly discuss those 5 stars. The first star simply is releasing data in whatever format it is under an open license. So it can be a PDF, it can be an image, it can be a spreadsheet. So long as you release it, you get 1 star. Second star means releasing it in machine readable formats. So this could be spreadsheets from Excel and things like that. The third star, which for me is the sweet spot, this is the minimum effort but maximum impact star, is releasing it in open machine readable formats. So instead of Excel, what we can do is we can release it in CSVs, ODS, other delimited text formats, and this helps our users actually utilize the data more because they don't need to add another layer just to clean the data, and you don't add another barrier, which is they need to procure software to use with the data. The fourth and fifth stars are about linking the data set, providing them their proper URIs, putting them in the web instead of just on the web, which allows you to provide context about your data. So if you want to learn more about that, I suggest you look for 5-star open data online. Of course, as you scale up your project, this is where you can really leverage these open source APIs and frameworks to make it easier for your users to find, to use, to access, and to analyze your data. This brings me to my third point, which is the utilization of open source solutions. There are a lot of open source software and open source solutions out there focused so much on planning, on data, on development, on citizen engagement. And it's, as mentioned by Tanya, sometimes you don't have to build it yourself. You can support these burgeoning open source communities and see where you can help each other. SICAN is an open source open data platform. There are a lot of citizen engagement applications that are open source. Fix My Street in Europe and other applications like that. So You don't have to build it yourself. You can meet with these communities and see, how you can help each other grow. Open source has a lot of benefits in terms of providing, lower cost for acquiring your systems, having no vendor lock-in, which is another great thing, as mentioned by Tanya earlier, providing opportunities for growth and self-development for your staff, and lastly, the democratization of technology and access to technology for your citizens. The last one is very important because even if you have open data, and even if you have the most advanced technologies, if people won't use it, if people don't want to use it or don't know how to use it, then it doesn't matter. That won't have any effects on on this digital transformation that we're wanting to do. We have this saying in Smart City that a simple tool that anyone can use is better than a high-tech one that only a few can master. Which brings me to my last point. Again, beyond technology, and this is something very true for us at Smart City. Beyond technology, we prioritize citizen engagement and capacity building. We ensure people use the data and technologies that we have and ensure that they use the things that we build. In order to do that, we must include them. We have to be inclusive. We must include them at all stages of 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 our digital transformation journey, from planning to implementation to monitoring. As I mentioned, we should be inclusive, painfully inclusive, such that no single person, department, organization will have a monopoly of data. Another thing we say a lot at Smart City is that the field of data is far too important to be left to data scientists. We should invest in data literacy, in empowering our citizens. Let's help them understand what data means, how they can read graphs and charts appropriately, how they can draw correct conclusions from data, and most importantly, how they can recognize if data is being used to mislead, or using it in inappropriate ways. Aside from teaching them data skills, focusing on data literacy also allows us to, or requires us really, to provide a safe space, a safe environment for people to learn, to share, and to practice working with data. Empowering citizens is not just about giving them skills. It's also about providing that technical, social, and sometimes even legal structures that would keep them safe in terms of making it easier for them to work with data. And in the end, if you have people who are good at working with data, then it's easier for you to work with them. I'll repeat myself when I say that an engaged and data literate citizenry is really one of the biggest assets that you can have towards digital transformation. So summing it all up, there's just two things really. We embrace openness and we invest in data literacy of our citizens. Last point, I want to say that anything worth doing is worth doing well. And that even though I mentioned that there's ways where we can have minimum effort and maximum impact, at the end of the day, working towards building digital transformation is a journey, and this digital transformation shouldn't just be a technological transformation. It should also be sort of a cultural transformation about building a culture of openness, a culture of data, a culture of data literacy, and a culture of innovation. And building culture is hard. Building culture is really hard. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and there are no shortcuts. But the thing that I can promise everyone is that in the end, both the journey and the destinations are pretty sure are worth it. So that's it on my end. I give the floor back to Yung Wei. And again, thank you so much for listening and open for any other questions later. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks for your sharing. Yeah, Tanya, anything you want to add on from here?
I think to Ali's point that the journey is worth it, it is very, very rewarding. It's a journey normally that requires a lot of listening to others and to learning from the experience of others. So anyone wanting to embark, I think the first thing you need to do is to, I don't know whether it's pick up the telephone or do a WhatsApp or a Zoom, but to try and get as much information from people who have attempted to do things and have achieved things in the past, but also those who have failed, because you know, as the old adage goes, it's there are no failures, only learning opportunities. And I think that Ali, you would perhaps agree with that it's this is something where when you try and actually implement a project, that's when all the worms come out of the woodwork, right? You kind of see, oh my God, this data set does not speak to this one because you know, my labels are wrong, or so I think I absolutely concur with Ali.
Yeah. Thanks, Tanya. Yeah. Ali, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, actually, it was Ben who was speaking, not me. But yeah, I'm totally agree with what Ben said.
Sorry,
Okay.
I couldn't see my thing much. So sorry.
No worries.
Okay, yeah. I have a question for Ali. So basically, in the past, we had a conversation and you shared about a new term called smart territories. Yeah, that refers to a broader concept previously known as the smart sustainable cities and communities. So UN actually defines smart territories as innovative territories that use digital technology and other methods to improve life quality, operations, and urban services efficiently and competitiveness, ensuring that it satisfies the needs of the present and future generations, as well as respect cultural aspect. So where does this concept of smart cities and smart territories currently stand, and how AWS is actually helping to facilitate the creation of smart territories?
Yeah. First, thank you, Yangwei. Quickly to introduce myself and give some background on the work I'm doing in the field of smart cities. So I'm a specialist solution architect for IoT at Amazon Web Services, and I help our public sector partners and customers to implement and operate efficient and scalable IoT and smart cities solution in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've been working on IoT and smart cities over the last 12 years, and I'm the president of Citizen Clan, a non-profit organization I founded 5 years ago with the aim to empower citizens to innovate and participate actively in implementing innovative solutions in their territory. So what said Ben about involving citizens definitely resonates with me. And so I'm very happy to be with you today to discuss this topic of high interest for me. So yeah, you mentioned smart cities. The concept of smart cities has been around for decades. However, we've seen an important development during the last year in the in the approach cities and more broadly territories have with the concept of smart cities and smart territories. So, by the way, I might say smart cities sometime, but I prefer to use the concept of territories as it can include all geographical areas in which residents interact with public organizations that provide infrastructures and services. So in that sense, smart territories can be cities, regions, countries, rural areas, and so on. They all share this primary mission to deliver a good quality of life to their citizens. This involves providing infrastructures and services like transportation, waste management, traffic management, or air quality monitoring. And over time, they need to improve these services to increase the efficiency of their infrastructure, face different kinds of challenges, environmental, economic, or socials. And to improve them, territories need to be able to measure, to monitor, to collect and store data for a certain period of time so they can understand the complex interactions in their territory and detect patterns. Because a territory is a complex environment in which minor decisions can have an impact on several levels. I like to take the example of a territory changing a two-way street into a one-way street, which is quite common. Intuitively, we know that this decision might have an impact on the road traffic on and around the street. But this is not the only impact this decision might have. This can have an impact on the air quality, the noise level, or the economic development of the area. So to make informed decisions, policymakers need to be able to observe, to measure, and to understand these impacts. It means being able to access and analyze data from heterogeneous sources. And this is something that is difficult to accomplish for territories relying on vertical silos solution or off-the-shelf platform. Because without a consistent strategy in terms of data models and standards, each solution provider might have its own data structure, its own security mechanism, its own API, and even its own user interface. And if I come back to the example of the one-way street, then a territory would have to implement for each source of data they want to process a custom solution just to gather the data and start to analyze them. So you can imagine the complexity of orchestrating all these vertical solutions. And in case they decide to change service providers, they might need to rebuild the solution from scratch or to repurchase one. So this is not efficient, this is not scalable, and this is not sustainable. And this leads to not only technical challenges, but also business, legal, and operational challenges, because procurements, contract management, and more importantly, data ownership, all these questions have to be considered for each of these different providers. Another drawback is that among these silos, so some might use the same technology or the same component, like a database engine, for example, preventing territories to benefit from mutualization of resources across their applications and take advantage of economies of scale. So at the end, this is like buying a new phone each time you need to install a new application. These vertical silos solution, they can be okay to do proof of concepts, but they become quickly unsuitable for interdependent and interconnected use cases territories are dealing with. And as I said in introduction, we've seen important development recently, especially on that matter. There is a strong trend to dismiss any proprietary solution. Territory, more than ever, they are now keen to use open source platforms based on standards that allow them to develop, modify, and tailor solutions to meet their specific needs and reduce vendor dependence. They also want to have access to a global market of standardized solutions, because technically speaking, for waste management in Paris, in Buenos Aires, or Tokyo, there is not so much difference. And a concrete example of this trend is the OASC network. So OASC, that stands for Open and Agile Smart City, is a non-profit network connecting more than 150 cities in over 30 countries that promotes the use of building blocks using open standards, open APIs, and shared data models. Amazon Web Services announced last April a global collaboration with OASC to support territories to implement these standards. We've been also supporting partners and customers to implement Fireware-based building blocks. So Fireware is an ecosystem of over 400 companies building open source platform components based on the same standards I mentioned. These two initiatives, OASC and Fireware, are actually closely linked each other. And at the heart of a Fireware-based platform, there is one building block called the context broker that enables territory to assemble together information linked to different systems within the organization, breaking down information silos and enabling the exploitation of the data with a more holistic view. So organizations can share part of this data they manage with third parties, other organizations to improve processes across an ecosystem of organization, or third developers enabling development of new innovative services upon shared data or open data. A good example of that is Vienna in Austria, ranked first in the Smart City Strategy Index in 2019. Vienna has deployed a context broker to gather data from different sources across the city and made them available through standardized APIs. And this led to the development of over 200 new applications by third-party software engineers. This is a great example of how standards and open data can efficiently foster innovation. Territories leveraging a context broker can then over time add new capabilities with additional building blocks that will produce and consume the data. These building blocks can be visualization tools, IoT platforms, data lakes, or artificial intelligence capabilities. And the context broker integrated with these other building blocks makes building up smart platform easy, faster, and free, because the interactions between these building blocks and the context broker are based on global standards, so they are interoperable by design, meaning that territories could add or replace building blocks seamlessly, as they are all based on common standards and data models. So they can build new building blocks or reuse existing ones that are freely available. We've been supporting customers to build new building blocks. For example, one IoT building block leveraging our IoT services, interacting with a context broker, but also helping customers to run existing building blocks like the context broker, leveraging our container services. So Amazon Web Services has been continually expanding its services to support any workload, capability, or any building blocks our customers would need to build or to run. We provide over 175 fully featured services, including compute, storage, databases, analytics, IoT, AML, security, and management. For example, I'm working with some customers and partners on the implementation of some building blocks using our serverless services. So serverless services allow our customers to focus on the value and pay only for what they use, while having an automatic and highly scalable and available platform. So they don't have to spend their time in provisioning, maintaining their infrastructure. It becomes then easy and cost efficient for our customers to build an IoT platform, a data lake with analytics capabilities compliant with these open standards. So once they have then the data securely stored in their environment, they can leverage our management and security services to build an open data strategy to share securely data with their residents or with other organizations. We also help them to design their building blocks using our infrastructure as code capabilities, so they can deploy them within minutes, they can iterate and innovate faster. So that was a quick overview of how we support our customers and partners in that space. If you need more information and discuss how we can support you on this, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, and I will be happy to dive deeper on this with you.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. So you mentioned on open source, open standards, and in many countries, especially in the global south, people will use these terms, open data, open source software, open standard, interchangeably. So do you think the Confucius actually pose challenges when they actually start to plan for the open digital solutions? Ali?
In what sense challenges? Can you?
Yeah, because I think a lot of times they confuse the terms between the open standards, open source, and also open data. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was I explained how to actually efficiently gather data, because when we see open data, that's only part of the data territory might want to collect, might want to gather, and that's part of the data strategy. That's not the whole data strategy. But to be able to develop an efficient open data strategy, you need to have a data strategy first, an efficient data strategy. And that's the same for standards and specification. So you have some open source solutions that you can find, like I explained with Fireware. So they provide open source building blocks that you can use or to build your platforms. But it doesn't mean that you have to share your data publicly. So that's a distinction to make. Then part of this data, if you want to, if a territory want to share this data with the community, they can open this set of data to the community. So there is a difference indeed in open source and standards, because you can do private deal with private data using open source standards.
Thanks. Ben, you want to add on?
Yeah, yeah, sure. For me, we can actually avoid this confusion, or there shouldn't be this confusion when we talk about different open stuff. If we just look at really as I mentioned earlier, the open definition. What does it really mean to be open? And this definition, you can find at opendefinition.org, is essentially inspired by the open source definition, by the Debian Free Software Guidelines, and if you take it all the way back from the 4 essential freedoms of free software. And the confusion usually arises from my experience when other entities try to change or appropriate the meaning of openness for their own purposes, even when that purpose doesn't really isn't really 1:1 or equal to the meaning of openness. So that is usually when the confusion happens. You can find entities talking about open platforms, even though open this, open that, even though the openness there, the open there is more free as in free food and not open as in free as in freedom. Because when you talk about openness, you're talking about freedoms. You're talking about the freedoms that these applications, that these software, that these data provide you. So I think some of the confusion arises from those things. We should also be aware of how the different way by which we use open in open data, in open source, and sometimes in open standards. Because for the former, when you talk about open data, open source, it's really about the openness of the thing itself, the openness of the data, the openness of the source code, the openness of the application. It's not, from experience, it's not usually the case with standards. When I've seen some open standards, they use the word open to mean that the standard was built in the open, right? So it was inclusive. They used open methodologies to build the standard, but the standard itself may not be open, meaning people may not change the standard. They don't have the essential freedoms needed for the standard itself to be open. So there's a slight difference there, which we should be aware of. Which leads me actually to another point about this, that we should be wary of, and we should be aware of possible open washing, because open washing exists. It's similar to greenwashing. When some entities try to make it seem that they are more open source or open data, just so they can capitalize on the growing demand of those technologies and of those solutions. And that's actually a testament to how much value there is right now in open data and open source, that we have some entities that are capitalizing on this when back then probably it wasn't the case. So yeah, those 3 things, just we always have the open definition to look back on if we're confused. We should know the difference between we use open for the object, but versus open against the process. And lastly, we should be wary, or we should at least be aware that there is open washing, and that's something that happens, that really happens in our world. So yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Yeah, Tanya, anything you want to add on, since you have been working in many projects, yeah, and especially your experience working with the local governments back in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would absolutely concur with Ben that the word open is more about a philosophy. So it's you know, it should be used if the organization using it really does share the or agree with a common ground in terms of what open means philosophically. And I think that in terms of also what Ben was saying with open standards, for me, whenever I hear open standards, I think standards them need to be constant. Standards, of course, can evolve with time, but they should be predictable. Otherwise, they cease to be standards. So you can't, you know, achieving standards for an organization or for a developer or for anyone wanting to get something out into market is a process that takes a long time. So if somebody has to, or an organization has to continuously revisit that and relearn what that standard means, it kind of really does question the whole raison d'etre of having a standard in the first place. You know, just everyone do what you want, and let's not kid ourselves that we're all trying to, you know, work to this framework that's been agreed, you know, democratically and established to enable something to grow in a sustainable and predictable manner. So that would be the only other thing I would say there. On the policy side, Yung-Wei, the European Commission has actually published an open source strategy. So if I would suggest that people actually look that up, or I can put it in the chat if I find it somewhere. It's publicly available, and it's quite interesting. I think that it's, in some bits it's kind of demonstrates a little bit of a confusion as to about what this strategy should be, but it's still, I think, really commendable that somebody within the Commission has said, actually, let's put pen to paper, and then we can adapt this with inputs from the community, which is absolutely the case, and we can continue to evolve this as a way of thinking. But let's set out there this intention to really start to embrace, you know, open source particularly, but also open other things as well, if you read the document, as a way that we want to explore and see whether that can actually fit into, you know, how we operate as an organization. And anyone who's worked for the European Commission over the years knows that this is a really bold move on their side. And I think it's up to everyone to kind of like contribute to that and see how that can grow into something, as I say, that adds value for everyone.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Okay, so we have a question from the attendees. So it's when the question is, when the open data or service provider make use of the data for non-open purpose, does that make it no longer that open? And is there a need to define, especially to regulate how one can offer the open data or the services to the public? Any panels wants to start off first?
I can have a go at it. Or Tanya, do you want to go first?
Yeah, Ben?
Sure. Yeah. Again, I would go back to what we mean when we say open. When you say open, you shouldn't put restrictions on how it is used, but at the same time, you can add requirements that if the data or the source code is going to be used commercially, they need to release whatever it is that they do under the same license. So this is the concept of, you know, copyleft. This is the concept of share alike. So for example, if something is licensed under this kind of open license, if someone creates derivatives from that, you may require them to make sure to ensure that those derivatives they make are also open, which allows you then to actually ensure the propagation of openness, that it doesn't stop somewhere. So that's the concept there. That's the importance of using this open licenses in things like this. Because when we say non-open, I think people confuse commercial commercial purposes for non-open as meaning non-open, but that's not the case. There are commercial open source solutions. A lot of people provide solutions using open source software. You can use open source commercially. The opposite of open source is not commercial, it's proprietary, meaning closed source. So you can, by the definition of open itself, you're allowed to use it in whatever purpose will serve you. But at the same time, if the open license that it has requires you to share whatever it is that, you know, the derivatives that you create or the data that you create from the other data in the same license, then you should respect that. You know, Tanya mentioned openness is a philosophy, and it's also a community, and it's built around trust. It's built around, you know, respecting each other, providing proper attribution, and, you know, respecting the openness. And that I think, if you really want to learn more, the nitty-gritty of it is really a lot of legalese. But if you want to learn more, there are places where you can learn about open licenses and how they really help with ensuring, ensuring the posterity of the data, to ensure that it becomes open, not just now but also, you know, in the long run. Yeah, I think for me that's how I would look at it.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So, Tanya, do you want to add on in terms of the regulation, how one can offer the open data or services to the public based on your experience from your projects in Europe?
So that's quite interesting. So I think Ben absolutely hit the nail on the head when he referred to the licenses attached to using anything, everything from data through to software. And I think Ali, you were referring to OASC and the context broker FIWARE as an organization, but also as a movement, if you like, also has very strict regulations as to how whatever they produce can be used, and the rights and the obligations also attached to that usage. And I think that's really healthy because, again, as Ben said, this is about creating a community that is self-propagating and to always be able to move forward. It's a little bit, if you think of the research community, when somebody writes a paper and they attribute that knowledge and the hard work and the sweat, blood and tears that others have put in, Newton standing on the shoulder of giants. It's absolutely the case in for open source communities and open communities generally, right? The communities can only flourish and continue to advance insofar as they acknowledge the work that's gone on previously, but also they adopt the philosophy again, and the unwritten rules, but also the written rules, those that are in the licenses that regulate how that work can be used. And it's not about, again, as Ben said, it's not about commercialization. I think that commercialization is not a dirty word. It is absolutely at the core of many of the startups. If they did not have a commercial mindset, they wouldn't last very long. But it's definitely about making sure that you're also contributing to that body of knowledge and ensuring that it advances in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. Ali, anything you want to add on?
Yeah, nothing to add. 100% agree with what Tanya just said. I think contributing is the key word here, is to make it easier for the community, improve the standards if they are the standards, because at one point the open source solutions need to be as much as efficient that proprietary solution if you want at one point to kind of compete. So that's why contributing is, I think this is the key word here.
Yeah, thanks. So we talk about also one of the important things is the citizen. Yeah, especially in the global south, this open concept, open digital solution is not so much adopted yet at this moment. Yeah, I think Ben would agree from since he's from Philippines. Yeah. So any advice from all of you, like how we want to make sure the citizens, the community are game for these open digital solutions? Yeah, so that we can move innovation at a faster pace. Yeah, any advice from any one of you?
I can maybe start with that one. I think again the key thing here is trust. 85% of citizens do not trust IoT devices, and given the attacks on, for example, Ireland's health system, that have basically just made the whole thing stop for 5 days, that's hardly surprising. I think another piece of data there is that I was just doing a presentation yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. The average IoT device takes 5 minutes to be hacked, to suffer an attack of some kind. So the issue of trust, flippancy aside, is a really, really crucial one. So citizens need to be confident that their data, if it's being collected, is being collected for a given purpose. In Europe, we have the GDPR. That safeguards our rights and actually says, it sets as the principle, I own my data, I am the owner of my data, and I tell you what you can store, for what purpose, and for how long. And if I ask you to remove my data, you have to remove my data. So I think the GDPR, which has been copied, everywhere from California through, to Singapore, I think it's a really, really good starting point, and it's the basis on which part of that trust can be established at citizen level. So it's certainly in Europe, it's really important, but it can't be the only measure, right? It's trust by regulation goes so far. There's something more that needs to happen, and to be honest, I don't know what that is. Maybe Ben and Ali have some brilliant ideas.
Yeah, Ben, Ali?
Yeah.
I think trust is. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No, go, Ali, go. You go first.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
trust is an important word, and also I would suggest to focus on the mission. So what is the mission for territories? Is to improve the quality of life. So always having in mind this mission, and also look at the tools, the efficiency of the tools to improve this quality of life. And then from this, iterate. I think there is a need to have a kind of more agility in these projects, and don't try to kind of have the off-the-shelf platform that can do everything before even starting one project. I think with baby step you can do a lot in a territory. So that would be my my point on this.
Okay, thanks, Ali. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I totally agree with what both of them said. Trust, especially here in the Philippines, trust takes a lot of or trust is one of those key components that would allow you to actually benefit, not just the community to benefit from you, but you to benefit from the community. In relation to that, aside from openness, we look at data ethics, right? What is ethical to do when you're actually working with a community? Because sometimes this is from my experience in like open mapping initiatives. There are some communities, especially indigenous communities, that do not want to be mapped, and it's gonna be your decision as the person collecting the data. Do you want to that you might need to map them in order for them to be included, but their decision as a community is that they don't want to be included. So it's much more complex, and yeah, as Tanya's mentioned, it's not a simple case of I trust you, you trust me. It's really much more complex than that. But trust plays a big role, and especially here for me in the Philippines, not being afraid to go down and dirty, go down really to the communities, talk with them, and participate in what they're doing is crucial. We can't have planners just be in their offices planning the lives of these people when it's these people's lives that are at stake. So you have to be ready to really go down and talk to these communities and ask about what's bothering them, what is it that they need. And I also 100% agree with what Ali has said in terms of agility. It's something when you're working with the small communities that require you to be, not just modular, but also for you to be able to go with changes as they come in, to go with the punches as they come in, because being too rigid would be your downfall when you're working with communities, especially with technology and communities, because both of those two things can change drastically overnight. And if you're not able to, if you're not agile enough, as Ali has mentioned, to be able to work around that limitation, then you might as well just hang it up right at the start. So yeah, trust and agility are two things that I totally agree on with what they said when it comes to ensuring community participation and community engagement.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yes, yeah, almost time. So thank you very much to Ali, Tanya, and Ben for your participating in this fireside chat. It's really great talking and sharing that you have done. So thank you very much. And for the attendees, we do hope that you will join us in our next event. And also Tanya actually shared about the Connected Places events. Yeah, so do join the event as well so that we can learn about the different things that they have implemented. Yeah, thank you very much, and talk to all of you again. See you. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, everyone.
Bye
Thank you.
bye. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Have a
Have a
great day.
great day. Bye.
Bye.